Again, Gills fans, welcome back to the latest episode of Gills in the Pub. The band are back together after a 6-7 month break. I think the last time myself, Jack and Reece all got together was in the immediate aftermath of Steve Evans being sacked. So we've got plenty to get through, gents. First of all, you both good?
All good, mate.
Thanks, mate.
All good, mate.
Right, we'll crack straight on then. I think it's probably only fair that we go right back to 30th of April. Seems a good point to start as anywhere. We lost 2-0 at home to Rotherham. They got promoted. They celebrated on our pitch. We didn't even get to see the players do a lap of honour. There was a pitch invasion. And we're now League Two football club. Culmination of many things, I think, wasn't it, Jack?
Yeah, I'd say so, mate. There's so many things to kind of to take away from last season as probably being factors. I don't think the players ultimately were probably good enough is the long and short of it. But I don't think the toxicity around the club probably helped that. And, you know, I think as fans, we've got to kind of look at ourselves a little bit in that regard, but equally, obviously the chairman and the manager, both at differing points, have aided to that toxicity too. So it's a combination of factors, mate, as to why we've ended up where we are, I think.
Yeah, I think we all, like you said, and you've said, we all have to take some blame. Obviously, us as fans, the least. I'll come to you then, Reece. I've written down who was to blame: players, chairman, manager, and this is not including Neil Harris in that, not by any stretch of the imagination. So, for me, it was probably a mixture of all three, and I think at times, like Jack said, we was probably not helpful to the situation as fans because we were getting beaten up on a Saturday. We were watching our team lose and generally not be very good. But if you had to pinpoint one of them 3 or 4 factors or a point in the season, I mean, we can probably go right back to the summer when we didn't have a pre-season, but why did we get relegated?
Yeah, I suppose it's a sit on the fence answer, but like Jack says, I think it is hard to blame Scally, Evans, or the players more one over the other. To be honest, I think all 3 parties are involved. I agree with Jack completely that where I probably do feel a little bit sorry for the players is that the chairman and the manager sort of having arguments with each other via the press every other week probably wasn't beneficial. And you know, we've heard rumours about some of Evans's conduct towards the end, which again, you can't blame the players for that if his training sessions were poor and he wasn't putting the right fitness work into them. But on the flip side, like Jack says, the players weren't good enough. You know, over a 46-game season, the league table doesn't lie. We always say that. And essentially, both penalty boxes, we were woeful. We conceded far too many goals and we didn't have the quality and the creativity to score any. And, you know, if you look at the league table, we could have stayed up with, 43, 44 points in the end, which is ridiculous. I think you could make a case to say that any of the bottom 6 in League One last season deserved to go down. It's quite possibly the worst bottom 6 League One's ever seen. So yeah, as much as it was frustrating that obviously Harris come in and did brilliantly through his time from January and got us close, at the end of the day, I think when you consider the conduct of chairman, manager, the quality of the players, we got what we deserved at the end of the day, and that was League Two football for the coming season.
It's an interesting point though on Evans, because if you look at the players that have left this football club, quite a number of them have actually gone on to now sign for him again at Stevenage. So you have to kind of look at that and say, well, is he that bad of a manager that you know, if players want to go and play for him again? But then on the flip side, Harris got on playing infinitely better than he did, yet they've come and signed for him again. So it's such an interesting one, really. Like, I think Evans gets a lot of slated quite a lot, but you know, it's interesting to see so many players go and sign for him. That would be my just comment, sort of over and above what we've already said, really, because you know, you wouldn't, for all the negativity that's gone towards Evans and the supposed stories, why would players go and want to play for him again?
Yeah, it's a good question because, I mean, we signed the likes of Danny Lloyd and Reece Bennett last summer. They've played for Steve Evans previously. I think you only have to look at his transfer window at the moment now. He's at Stevenage. Aaron Chapman's followed him. Is it Danny Rowe or Danny Rose has gone there having played from at Mansfield? There's a couple of others, I think. The interesting one for me, actually, would be to see how Elliot List fares this season, because obviously Steve released him, didn't he, quite quickly after taking over 3 summers ago now, which is mad, isn't it? I think we all sort of lose track of time a little bit because of the COVID that's come up in the middle of that. But yeah, I don't disagree with what either of you said. I think it has to be a combination of all three. I don't think it's fair to sit here and say it was entirely Paul Scally. I don't think it's fair to say it was entirely Steve Evans, and I don't think it's entirely fair to say it was the players. Ultimately, we all hear whispers and things around the ground and on social media, but until you get it from the horse's mouth, so to speak, then it's all just conjecture and hearsay. And like Reece said, table doesn't lie, and ultimately we got what we deserved, and that was League Two football for the coming season. So relegation done. Obviously, Neil Harris came in. I think Jack made a good point and said that these players were 10 times better under Neil than they were under Steve Evans. So there's a question there that you have to ask: did Steve lose the dressing room? But essentially, over 46 games, we didn't win enough games. We didn't get enough points. There was one question I wanted to ask, actually. I know we're not a League One club anymore. Maybe I'm just clinging on for grim death. But Reece said it was probably the worst bottom six in the history of League One, or at least how far back he can remember. To maybe flip that the other way, Jack, do you think that it's potentially a fact that because the top end of League One is so good and so saturated with big money now, that maybe the gap has just essentially got so big between the bottom portion of the table and the top portion? I'm not saying we were good or we were unlucky by any stretch of the imagination, but I just think there's such a chasm now between the Sunderlands, the Wigans, the Rotherhams that were in our division last season, and compared to what we were, where we're always, we're basically essentially shopping in free transfer market.
Yeah, I think you're probably right, mate. But then again, you think of an interesting point. Evans got us to 10th place twice. So there is a gap that undoubtedly, I don't think there's any denial of that at all. And trying to finish anywhere in the top 10 would be a task for anyone of a club our size. So again, when you go back to seeing whose blame it was, Evans has got us into 2 10th place finishes with virtually, probably I would suggest, I imagine, the same sort of budget. So it's an interesting one how he'd done so poorly. I think, we talk about who's to blame. We try not to labour that too much, but, I think it probably started with Scally. Evans then probably, in my opinion, didn't want to be at the club anymore and therefore kind of down tools. And that probably rubbed off on the players, is probably my thinking. And by the time we got to January, when there was a sniff of, staying up by appointing Harris, we probably did it a bit too late because he couldn't bring any of his own players. And therefore, that's probably been the contributing factors, mate, is what I would say. But I agree with the initial question. Yes, I think there is a gulf. There undoubtedly is, and it's only going to get wider, more so than when we've been in League One previously, definitely.
Yeah, 100%. And again, I suppose then to maybe big up Steve Evans a little bit, it makes his achievements the first 2 seasons probably that little bit better as well. I know we were lucky in the sense that we was able to get Jordan Graham in on a free transfer, and we found Dane Oliver, who was very good in that second season, and we had very good players the first season under Steve as well, and we were defensively very sound, Reece. But let's move away from relegation. We are a League Two club. We cannot change that. All we can do now is look forward. The first big change in the Neil Harris reign, I think, was announced end of March, and that was that we were dragging ourselves, maybe kicking and screaming, into the 21st century, and we'd appointed a head of recruitment rather than letting the manager do absolutely everything. Maybe that's why we couldn't afford a tactics board, who knows. What have you made so far, Reece, because of Nicky Shorey? Because we've not seen him. They promised an interview on iFollow when he first arrived. We've not seen that. Maybe he's just too busy. He is alive. I did see him at Dover, walk past. What was your initial reaction to that appointment, and I suppose what are your hopes for it moving forward? Because Neil's spoken about this wanting to make the gap between the first team squad and the younger groups a lot smaller. He wants to see more Jack Tuckers coming through. So yeah, just your thoughts generally on the Nicky Shorey appointment.
I think the concept's a good one. We've been guilty, to be honest, for probably the last 5 or 6 years, but particularly as much as Evans brought us some very, very good players, he also signed a lot of very, very poor ones. And when we are a club like ourselves now, that we know we're working with a fairly restricted budget, it is important that we bring the right players in. Obviously, it seems like it's Harris's request to get someone like Shorey in, so that we have to trust that if Harris wants that, it's the right thing for him. In terms of judging how he's doing so far, it's always hard because, yes, you expect you get ahead of recruitment and you're going to sign loads of players, but at the end of the day, it's not him parting with the cash to do it. Do I look at the signings we've so far and think they can all offer us something? Yes, on paper. But as we know, the game's not played on paper. We've signed plenty of players in the past that look amazing. They've turned out to be flops, and then we've signed players that we don't expect a lot from, and they turn out to be really, really good for us. So until we start playing, we don't know.
Like Tom Eaves.
I don't.
He is generally the exception to the rule. I might add. Everyone brings up, well, look at Eaves, but when do you rarely? Yeah, exactly. When do you don't see many people that have a bad record do well for the club after having a bad record before. I would have, but I think just to go further on Reece's point, mate. You know, the idea of a head of recruitment is a great idea. I think it probably takes the burden off Harris quite a bit. Nicky Shaw's an international defender, clutching at straws. He got 2 caps, but more than us 3. You know, so he undoubtedly will have contacts in the game. I suppose my take on it is it's all well and good having a head of recruitment, but you know, there's 2 sides to it, as Reece has said. First of all, you know, do we have the budget to really be giving a head of recruitment responsibility for bringing good players in? You know, I don't think we're ever going to be able to bring in exceptional players with the budget that we're given. So you kind of think, well, is it worth it or not? Because it's a waste of a wage going towards him. And then when you look where we are, you know, there's 2 schools of thought on it. You know, we've signed 8 players. We've got a squad of 14, probably 13 now, with Maynard Brewer dislocating his shoulder.
14 is 14.
Is it 14? Yeah. Right, got you, mate. So on that basis, you probably would say, you know, has he done his job well enough? We got relegated on the 30th of April. The 9th of May was when we announced our retained list. So essentially, what's that? You know, that's 2 months to sign 8 players. That's 4. It's 1 a week. You could argue that's okay, but with the squad size that we had, you'd think we'd have done slightly better. But then at the same time, the flip side argument of that is that, you know, we're biding our time and looking to bring in the best quality players. But I get the feeling that we're probably not doing that, and we're shopping in the 2nd, 3rd, 4th tier of player, because the number 1 choices probably wouldn't come here, or, you know, just not because of any lack of ambition as such, just what we're going to pay them, I suspect. So it's a good idea on paper. Whether in reality it will actually be any worth to it or not, we'll judge him, I guess, on who comes through the door sort of now. And then you also look back on it and think, well, he was employed in February. So not only
end of March.
Was it end of March? Okay, fair enough. So he's had quite a long time to draw up some potential lists, and we're still only on a squad of 14. So, you know, not wanting to be too negative, but I'd rather we be in a position with more players right at this moment. With two weeks ago till the season starts.
I think there's been whispers this week of, you know, there's meant to be a handful coming through the door, isn't there? And we've had Mika Mandron, but obviously we'll get onto that a bit later when we talk about the signings in particular. So if we got 3 more in this week, would give us 18 in essence. I know we've got the keeper problem, but you know, that's something we can't control, unfortunately, unless you want to be picky and say that, you know, the medical would have shown up that he's done it before. But do you think 18 would be an acceptable number ahead of Portsmouth? It would then give us 2 full weeks to probably get anything between 2 and 4 in, I'd say. I can't see us running with more than 22 senior professionals, and I'm including the likes of Bailey Akehurst in that. So if we was at 17, 18, Reece, by Portsmouth, would you be feeling a bit more confident than perhaps you was a couple of weeks ago?
Yeah, certainly is. Because I think with 18 senior players, you give yourself a chance of actually taking something out of friendlies in terms of, I think you can start working on a bit of structure and a bit of shape and your patterns of play and stuff. Whereas at the moment, when we went down to Dover the other day and, you know, we had 1 centre-back playing, we had no strikers at the time. It's sort of like we've discussed in sort of our own chats that they're fitness exercises, and that's all we're gaining out of friendlies at the moment, because we can't work on structure because we've not got a competitive senior 11 at the moment. So then if you get to 16, 17, 18, all of a sudden Harris starts to having a little bit more to look at. We're not quite there yet. Like we say, hopefully a couple more this week, but we've heard before signings on the pipeline and then they don't come, or they come later than we think. So fingers crossed we can get a couple more in this week, and then it will start looking a bit healthier, because especially as Harris has said, that we will use the loan market to the fullest we can. We have to appreciate that it depends with loans on how many players their parent clubs sign before they let players go out on loan and so on. So I expect there'll be a bit of a wait for the loan players more than anything else. But as long as we can get to 18 by the end of the week, I think people will be a lot more positive about the season than what they felt a week ago. That's for sure.
Yeah, because we've got this added issue now where you can name extra substitutes, or you can bring on extra substitutes. Sorry, so I think it's still you can name. Is it you can name 7 or you can name 9 now?
I think it's 9.
So you can name 9 now. So we really need to get to 20.
I think the frustration. I think
I
was going to say, I think the frustration, mate, as well, is born out of the fact that I watched your chat with Oliver the other day, with Dane Oliver, and he openly said that, you know, team cohesion is built during pre-season. You get to learn the people that you're playing alongside, what they do, their skills and their attributes. And we're not going to get that, mate, is the long and short of it. So even if you put, you know, even if you look at it and say, right, okay, by the first game, we're going to have a full strength squad. We've left it quite. I realise the base of 7 players is a hard place to start at.
Mm-hmm.
But when you've got a head of recruitment and we're leaving it 2 weeks till the start of the season with 14/15 players, it doesn't help in that regard. So I'm just taking it from what Oliver's said, you know, a professional footballer. So you could make the argument that even if we get the players in on time, it might be a slow start to the season because they're not going to know how to play with each other.
I think Neil said that, though, hasn't he, to be fair to him? He said that we're not going to be the finished article probably for the first month, 6 weeks of the season. And I genuinely can see that happening as well. I think we might start slowly. I know Bristol Rovers probably got a bigger budget. Probably. They've definitely got a bigger budget than us. But I could probably see something similar to how they went last season. They seemed to take a while to get going. And then from Christmas onwards, they were absolutely flying. And I'm not saying we're going to get promoted or anything like that, but I think that might be the pattern of how we go, that we start slowly and then really start to pick up once we do start to gel and start to work out patterns of play and systems and that type of thing. Got one more section and then I'm going to let you two take the floor a little bit because I know you both made notes. We've mentioned Nicky Shorey. We've said, yes, it's a great idea in essence because he can come in, he can identify players. Whereas I think Steve Evans and Paul Rayner were doing it themselves. We can now send Neil Harris to one game, Nicky Shorey to another, Dave Livermore to another. I'd imagine Darren Ibrahim would have probably gone out and looked at keepers as well. So we was able to spread the net a little bit further. So in that sense, it's great. But ultimately, as we've always known, it comes down to money. Would you say, and I'm not talking about the specifics of each player and where they play, do you think Mr. Scally is ultimately at least trying to back Neil Harris as much as possible based with what we've seen coming through the door at the moment? And also because of the fact that there are these rumours that won't go away, that we are actually bidding cold, hard cash for players, which is generally unheard of with us in recent years. I think the names that have been linked that are money are Paul McCallum. That's one that's not gone away all summer. I think Michael Cheek might have been mentioned. Harry Smith. That could just be because it's a Millwall link. I understand that. But I can't remember a summer probably in the last 5 years, certainly since Justin Edinburgh was with us, where we've been continually linked to paying a fee for someone in the summer.
But I'll believe it when I see it, mate, would be...
absolutely, until they're holding a shirt or a scarf, of course.
Yeah, it's a tough question. I don't think that I imagine the budget we're being given doesn't allow Harris to challenge within the top 7 because he's openly said that we've got a budget under the top 7.
Yeah.
And incidentally, he did say we had the 24th budget in League One, like Evans did, which contradicts Scally. Is he giving him everything probably that we can afford based on where we are as a club? I imagine so. So it doesn't necessarily. It's a twofold answer really. You know, we're probably getting the most out of the budget we're being given, but it's probably not going to be sufficient enough to potentially get us up. Is what I would say, mate. But just based purely on Harris's comments.
No, I think that's fair. And so all we can say is, as much as we can stretch, is all we can hope for is Paul Scally does stretch that far, because obviously we can't spend what we haven't got. That's generally the way of life, regardless of whether it's football or not, Reece. But I mean, if you look down the table, I'm just looking at it quickly, Reece. There's comfortably probably 8-10 teams that are going to spend more than us. I'm looking at it. There's the likes of Bradford, Salford, Tranmere, Crawley, Stevenage, I'd say. Stockport, that's straight away off the top of my hand. That's essentially the top 6 or 7 places field that teams that are, and I don't like to use this phrase because I get accused of saying this and that, but they're chucking money at it. So
yeah, and I think it's something Jack said a couple of days ago actually to the two of us, that, and I agreed with him, that I find it quite frustrating when small elements of the fan base, relish is the wrong word, but they don't seem to be too fussed if ever we get relegated, because they always say, oh, we've been in League Two before, we've been, and we'd be all right, we'll come back up. I think people don't realise that it's been 10 years since we were in League Two. And I think in the last 10 years, football's probably changed more than it had done in the 30 years prior to that. You know, you look at last time we was in League Two, we were stuck there for 3 years as it was. We spent money on Kedwell, we spent money on Whelpdale, we spent money on Lee, we spent money on Birchall. Alan had a pretty big wage budget, I would have said, for League Two when we got promoted, with the amount of experience that he signed. And we are not shopping in that same ballpark anymore. And like you say, when we got up from League Two last time, we probably was in the top 7 in terms of spend. It's not like that anymore. We're going to be in the middle of the road at best, probably. And I think that is where people have to be a bit careful of what they expect from League Two. I don't think it's the same League Two that we played in a decade ago. And we're also not the same club that we were 10 years ago. And I think it might be a harder task for us this season than some people realise, unfortunately.
Yeah, I agree with that, obviously, because it was my comments. But just sort of to add to that, really, one of the reasons we went up in 2012-13 was prior to us going, or the budget being given to Alan, we got money for Jarvis going to West Ham from Wolves, which was a sell-on fee. Bertrand, we kept getting add-ons from him for playing for Chelsea. And Paolo Gazzaniga was sold to Southampton for probably about £2 million. So yeah, we haven't got those bounties anymore, unfortunately. So I obviously agree. You know, that people look on relegation too favourably, in my opinion. Obviously, we are where we are, but I don't think it's going to be quite as easy as people make out. Especially when you look, as you've said, at the spending power of some of the other teams. And you know, we could labour this point forever, but we're on a downward spiral a little bit. You know, in terms of, obviously, you're on a downward spiral if you get relegated. But when we've been relegated previously, there's been more unity amongst the fan base and the club. And we've maintained a decent crowd. I mean, I'd be interested to see what the actual season ticket sales are. I was told they were 1,900 last year. Obviously, they've come out and said that they're larger this year. I would debate that point. Obviously, I don't work for the club, so you have to trust them on their word. But I don't think we'll get a bigger average gate than last year. So we are a byproduct of where we are as a club. And that is partly down to the chairman, not to labour that point too much, but I think people know my opinion on him.
Yeah, I think you made it clear, and that's fine. And like we said before we started recording, there's no point us three coming on here and we all have the same opinion, because essentially no one will bother watching. But one player, and again, before we get into the actual transfers and who we had signed and the specifics of what they might offer us, Reece, is Mika Mandron. Now, I know this time of year it's silly season, and a lot of these in-the-know sites come out, and they're generally kids that are doing their GCSE research and revision, and they've got nothing better to do, and they all fail their exams, but they like to create these pages, and you look at them and it says, oh yeah, arrived on Twitter May 2022, and you don't see them again until January. There was a few whispers of Mika Mandron obviously staying in League One. I think 2 clubs that I saw mentioned were Burton and Shrewsbury. I don't know how, kosher, legit that was, but would you say out of the 8 we've made, perhaps Mika Mandron was the most surprising, in the sense that if you look at his form over the last 2 seasons, and people will probably compare him to Verdane Oliver, and I've heard things on Twitter over the last couple of days, oh, he's nowhere near the same. He's been, he was not good enough for Crewe. They've got rid of him, which is untrue, because they offered him a contract and they were desperate for him to stay. We got rid of him 2 years ago. No, we didn't. We tried to keep him, but obviously we couldn't offer enough because of the COVID pandemic. Verdane Oliver scored 31 goals in 93 appearances in all competitions over that 2-year period. So it's literally 1 in 3. Mika Mandron scored 24 goals in 85 appearances over the same period. 1 in 3.5. There's not a great deal of difference. I think you're looking at 2 goals over a 46 league game season. Was you surprised, pleasantly or not, that we managed to get Mika Mandron to come in through the door?
Yeah, because I had seen a couple of, like you said, we don't know if it was just Twitter nonsense or actually any substance behind it, but I did see a couple of links of him to Burton, definitely, I see. So yeah, it did come as a little bit of surprise when it turned out that it's rumours sort of emerged on Twitter that we were going to be signing him. And I mean, I've got to be honest, from the first time we had him, I wasn't disappointed, but I wasn't pleased he left. I think it was probably partly because that he was very much in and out the team under Evans, wasn't he, the first time round? rather than someone that we see every single week playing. But yeah, he did okay for us that season. And obviously, he's not scored 15, 20 goals a season for Crewe, but we have to appreciate that. Obviously, we were a poor team last season as well, but Crewe have been poor for a couple of years now. His record still stood up, to be fair. Obviously, he's dropping down the division as well. Admittedly, I can see why people are comparing him to Oliver a little bit. We have to be realistic. He's not going to be the same aerial presence that Oliver is, because Oliver was best in the EFL for such numbers. But I think it would be just, again, if we look back to when he was here last time, the goal at Sunderland, the last game before COVID, I think he's got a little bit more of that finisher's instinct maybe than Oliver. And yeah, I'm we've had conversations. I was quite pessimistic a week ago, but just that one sign of a centre forward, a focal point coming into the team, all of a sudden changes the dynamic an awful lot. And now we see that we've got someone in that we know will do a job at the level above, not just the level we're at now. And all of a sudden pieces start coming together. We can get a couple of good players around him. Suddenly the landscape of the team changes completely.
I think as well, if you look at it, so he's a 6'3" lad. He is essentially partly a target man. If you're that size, you're going to be somewhat of a target man, even if you don't want to be. He's got a decent-ish goal record. I think he'll be the sort of lad that will probably end up with about 10 goals for us next season, maybe, which is probably in the same sort of realm as Kedwell when we got promoted, if you take his penalties out of the equation. So it's not terrible. I think it's one of those where, as you go back to your previous question, is it a decent signing for the budget we've got? I think, yeah, absolutely. Could we sign better in this division? Well, clearly we could, because others have, but we just don't have the finances. And whether I agree with it or not, we are where we are in terms of finances, and we're simply not going to overspend with Paul Scally, are we? Regardless of whether I think that's the right idea or not. And it probably is the right idea to not overspend and kill the club. I think it's a pretty decent signing. I can see why others have been negative about it. He's not got a fantastic goal scoring record, but crucially, he's probably not going to be the fox in the box type striker that we would have alongside someone like him. So I think it will be all right, mate. I think it's a good signing for what he'll bring to the table.
Yeah.
I also think quickly, obviously you made a reference, Jack, to Kedwell, the title winning team. Our top scorer probably had 11, 12 goals that season.
Yeah. And the same in 95, 96,
we shared
mate.
goals around.
Yeah, Leo only got
that.
about 12, I think.
Well, I mean, I
got
was
about
only
7
born then,
or 8,
but
and we
obviously
relied
I know
on
enough
loans
about
as well, I think.
Yeah. So
I think it's important to share goals around. So
I think it comes down to the defence as well, which we only have 2 centre backs, so we do need to crack on with that as well, to be fair. But yeah, I think in both seasons we've done very well defensively, which is ultimately probably where you're going to actually end up winning the league. To be honest, goal scorers will win your matches, but will score your goals, but defenders will probably win your matches at the end of the day.
Yeah, I think we probably need someone to play off of him. I know there's the interesting link is obviously Scott Cashgit, who's played with him last season. But yeah, just having a quick look, just quickly trying to find the Gills squad from that season.
I was initially quite negative about Cashgit, but my understanding is he's like a second striker winger. So I think if you look at his record, by the way, that's actually quite a decent signing on paper as well.
If we can keep him fit. Obviously, the issue would be the fitness. He's missed a lot of games, but again, like you say, it's where we're shopping, isn't it? If we can afford to go and spend 250,000 on a proven right winger who can play 50 games a season and scores 10 and assists 8, then we'd go and do it. But we can't, so we have to look elsewhere, don't we?
Yeah, absolutely.
It's like in any field. Just going off on a tangent. Talk amongst yourselves. Top scorer in the league, 2012-13. Danny Kedwell got 14 and Dion Burton got 12. So I'd be confident that Maker would probably be somewhere slap bang in the middle of that. I think he's probably a dozen goals man if he gets the right service. I think he was probably best. He played alongside Brandon Hanlon or Alex Jakubiak, didn't he, that first season? So I know there's been whispers of this lad from Millwall. Isaac Olaofe, I think is the name, who was at Sutton the last 2 seasons, did very well when they won the National League, and then I think he scored 9 in about 35 last season. So if you worked on him doing that, Mika scored an average of 12 over 2 seasons in League One, so he might go a couple above that. You're looking at 14, so you're looking at 23, 25 goals if they both have a very good season. I don't think that would be a disaster, as long as the midfield chip in as well. That's going to be the key. But I think Jack made a very good point. We was very, very sound defensively when we won it in 12-13, weren't we? The likes of Adam Barrett, and then we brought in Leon Legg in the winter window as well to shore things up. Andy Frampton, Matt Fish was a very good right back in that team, and who else did we have? The other side was Joe Martin part of that team, I think, wasn't he as well? So
yeah, he was, yeah.
All good, solid EFL pros. But right, obviously I did the itinerary. We've covered relegation. Nicky Shorey is Scally back in. Neil Harris, I'm going to leave it to you two now. If you two want to take it in turns, if you've got a couple of bits that you've written down and want to discuss, and then I've got season tickets, transfers, and 22-23 to go through afterwards.
I think one of the things, I mean, it's kind of on transfers a little bit, mate. One of the things I said was recently to people is if you're going to get a top level signing at this level, will probably be someone with a good record to begin with, and typically will be a person that a club is gutted to let go. Mm-hmm. I would say, mate, we've probably. I don't think any of our signings so far this summer probably fall into that category for both, but at least one. So I think that it's, again, just to sort of go back to what I said, it's kind of a byproduct of where we are as a club. I think there is negativity around people we've signed. I've been a little bit negative on some of them, but I think principally, if you look at who we've signed, I think they're decent signings for where we are as a club now. And I just, like I say, if you go back to, the days of early Scally signing the likes of Akinbaye or Taylor, they were players that Brentford and whoever, were gutted to let go, and equally had a very good record. So that's the main criticism you could probably label at our signings, is that they're either inexperienced or fans were quite happy to sit at the back of them, or they didn't know of them at all, because they're youngsters or whatever. So there's an inexperience there. But then on the flip side of that, you could make the argument that if they're inexperienced at this level, they've got a point to prove. But I think that will come out in the wash, I think, in the coming months. If you compare it to the 2012-13 season, which is the only comparison we can make at the moment, there's a lot less experience in this squad. And you have to kind of hope that we're probably going to add a little bit more experience to it, I would say, of quality experience if possible.
Probably compare it to 95, 96 as well. I think. If you look at just essentially the goalkeepers, 23 years old. I know football's changed a lot in 30 years, and we get that, so there's not a direct comparison. But we signed Jim Stannard, who was, he played 400 games in the EFL for Fulham. So there's a big difference there. We do need some experience. We've got some in. Don't get me wrong, but yeah, you make some good points. Reece, have you got anything to add to Jack's point before we let you take to the floor?
No, I agree with him about the experience point, and it also probably fits in with budget and why we are making the signings we are, is that generally experienced players are the ones that cost the money. It's probably why we don't sign too many, or if we do, it's generally players of experience that are over the crest of the wave, so to speak, like you'd probably say with Sean Williams. I don't get me wrong, I think Sean Williams would be a good player for us in League Two, but he's obviously not going to be Sean Williams in his prime. A bit like Burton. We signed Burton at 35. He was very good for us for a season in League Two, but we didn't have Dion Burton in his pomp. And yeah, especially defensively, like you said, obviously with the seasons back in when I was just a baby, and then the title winning season as well, experience at the back was crucial, and that is the area of the team now that we have got to start motoring on with, because I think it takes more work on the training ground to sort of defence out, more structure. Whereas, while we was getting frustrated waiting for the glamorous striker to come in, a goal scorer will score goals at the end of the day, I think, whatever team you put them in. Whereas the defence, I think you have to work a little bit more. And yeah, to only see us with two centre-backs at the moment, one of which has only played 2 games in the EFL, I believe, the other being Max Famer, who does Harris really, really want him? We could debate that. We don't actually know. And if you look at the fullbacks, obviously, we'll probably come on to them a bit more later, but also we brought Wright in, which, to be fair, it's probably up there with the signings I'm most happy with on paper. And then I think left-back's an issue, to be honest.
I think don't get me wrong, right? The reason I personally have called for the likes for Scally to go is I think we are stagnating as a club, and you know, even in League Two, we're not going to be a force. We are what we are, and there is an element of me that hates that. I want us to be ambitious. We were very ambitious with him at the beginning in League Two and in League One. But I think at the moment, the way we are as a club, we're stagnating, as I've said, we're on a downward spiral. And I think people just need to be a little bit more realistic ultimately with who we're probably going to end up signing. So obviously we'll probably cover them later, but I do think who we've signed, as I've said earlier, they are decent for the realism that needs to be involved with who we're probably going to end up signing. Whether that means we go up with them or not, I probably don't think so. But realistically, I think Harris has signed some decent players for the budget he's probably ultimately been given.
Yeah.
How do you think Harris feels about how the summer's gone so far?
Well, if you're personally, I think if you was a football manager, you'd want more than 14 players, wouldn't you? Will probably be the first.
He's come out and said that more than once, hasn't he? I think, but I think he's also trying to temper that and realise that if he wants to get the best players and the best characters, I think that's the key word that he keeps using, the best types of players rather than just solely ability. He probably has to wait, and I think that's probably the reason why we've only signed one striker. Goalkeepers, we've always said historically, you can get hold of fairly commonplace in the EFL. You can find two decent stoppers. You know, like last year we had Aaron Chapman and he sat on our bench for 6 months.
Yeah.
Strikers are always the hardest one. We know that as football fans. Neil Harris knows that as a football manager. Just to sum up, though, I just wanted to go back to the point you made, though, Jack, about the two categories that you look at for fans of the clubs they're leaving, and we seem to feel we probably ticked. I'd say probably the only one we ticked 2 boxes in was probably Mika Manjon in terms of his crew stint. But you spoke historically about players. Now I think we're trying to sign people that are probably just past their peak, like Reece said, Sean Williams, good player at this level, but, you know, he's 35, 36. People that are trying to prove a point, trying to get themselves back into the game. I know this Jordan Green's been on trial. I don't know if you two have read his story, but went to the Championship with Barnsley and fell out of love with the game because he couldn't get a game and went back to playing Sunday League. So that's one that intrigues me. I won't lie. I think it could be an exciting signing if we do decide that he's good enough to earn a contract. But Jack's spot on. If you go back to the start of Paul Scally's reign, I know right back to the beginning, we took a chance on Leo Fortune West, but we got Dennis Bailey, who 18 months ago had scored a hat-trick at Old Trafford in the Premier League. Then we got promoted. We signed Akinbaye, peak of his powers. Then we signed Carlos Arbor and Bob Taylor for 1.1 million for the pair, peak of their powers. Marlon King, highly rated, not the peak of his powers, but was highly rated coming up rather than going back down the other side of the hill. Simeon Jackson was highly rated, whereas now we seem to be signing people, dare I say it, that are trying to climb back up the hill.
Yeah, and I would say, mate, I've made this point in a previous edition, but the reason we signed those players is because we reinvested money that we you know, got for players we sold, which, you know, I've covered it before, but for whatever reason we don't seem to do anymore. You know, we did with Dempsey, and we're going to get Tucker money, obviously, but there's so many times over the last few years where we could have spent a bit of money on players, but we just chose not to. So it is, that kind of hampers us to a degree as well. And interestingly, you made the point earlier that Harris is interested in youth. I don't really understand then on that basis. I mean, we need a backup right back, and we probably need a 4th choice striker. Why we let Sito and Lintott go would be an interesting question to put to Harris. That would be another thing to say.
Yeah, it's a fair point, because we've seen Harvey Lintott obviously come back into League Two in the last 24 hours. He's gone to Northampton, and we wish him all the best. And Josh Chambers was the other one, wasn't it, that Neil Harris seemed to rate, but I'm not going to lose a lot of sleep over a kid that's played 70 minutes for us. It's not like we're losing someone that's played 30 games and provided 10, 15 goal contributions. If he turns out to be a superstar, we'll get battered, but we could sit here for an hour and talk about Premier League clubs that release players as youngsters and then had to buy them back for multi-millions. Peter Crouch, Nemanja Matic, there's 2 straight away. Paul Pogba's got to be the worst business plan ever from Man United, isn't it? So you let him go to Juventus on a free, you buy him back for 90 million, you let him go on a free, you bring him back, just ridiculous. Reece, have you got anything that you want to discuss pertinently that you've got written down that we've not gone over yet?
No, not massively. Just going to add to what Jack said, though. Obviously, this is a drum that Jack's banged, I think, every time we've been on here about how we should sell players more instead of relying on tribunals and stuff. And I think Tucker's a good example, because it was made public that in January we did have offers for Tucker that we said no to. And it's easy in hindsight. If you look now, and if we took 300 or 400 grand for Tucker in January and then reinvested some of that I think there's every chance we still sit in League One now, because don't get me wrong, I like Jack a lot. I think he's going to have an excellent career. He cost us a lot of goals last season, and was turning down the offers in January for Tucker beneficial to us in the end. I think quite categorically we could probably say it wasn't. And we probably could have made better use of the money in January to get a couple more players in, a bit of creativity. And I'm sure we could have started, or maybe have kept Bennett and then use that money for a bit of creativity further up the pitch. And then we might have stayed up. Who knows?
Essentially, it was one goal, wasn't it? It was one goal that cost us. And so if you can, and the one that springs to mind was Sunderland.
Well, and Morecambe, mate.
Yeah, there's a couple. And
Yeah.
obviously we're not sitting here and digging out Jack Tucker. I think we're all sit here and say we're big fans of Jack Tucker, and he did more good for us than he did bad. But that's probably a culmination of plenty of things, though, isn't it? We're not just saying it was Jack Tucker that was poor. He was playing in a poor team that was devoid of confidence, devoid of options, devoid of ideas for a lot of the season. And again, it comes back to the point we made right at the start, that the players, the chairman, the manager, they were all to blame. Steve Evans playing Robbie McKenzie up front in his final game was
the nail in the coffin.
I'm not sure. So
I think that goes back to him trying to get the sack, mate. I honestly believe it. Like, you don't make decisions like that, in my opinion. But just to go back to your point, you said, how do you think Harris feels? I think I'd be frustrated if I was him. We're one of these clubs that's got a lot of potential on paper, and Scally always says it. You know, with the biggest league club in Kent, he's always believed that we've got the potential. We just don't have the means to realise the potential. So I reckon he's kind of been sold a bit of a dream, maybe, or he might just be happy to just sit at a club like us, earn a wage, be close to his family, and try his best. I think I still look back on it and think, and I'll give Scally a lot of credit here, but not that I say that very often, but to a point, Neil Harris was an unreal coup when you think about it. Whether we gives him the tools to do his job or not is another matter. But to actually get someone like him, I think was at the very top end of the list that we could have ever dreamt of back in January. So I think
where do you two teams, just to go off, where do you two put him in terms of managers in League Two? Because for me, based on EFL experience, because I know there's one name that jumps off the page, where our former striker's just gone. But for me, in terms of EFL managerial experience, I think we've got the best manager in the division.
I'd say with money, Evans probably is. With money, I'd say if you base it on their record, Millwall probably gave him a decent budget in League One, one of the better ones. But to have actually got promotion out of there is a good achievement. There won't be many managers in that division that have got an EFL promotion on their CV.
And he's got on basically essentially at worst a mid-table championship side, Millwall, for a good couple of seasons before he left and went to Cardiff. Well, I don't know where you stand on it, Reece, but for me, he's certainly in the top 2 or 3. But I don't know every manager in League Two like the back of my hand. There would be names there that I've never even heard of before, but I'd say he's probably number 1. I must admit. And given if when we get to the start of the season, if the squad, when we finish our business, is made up of signings similar to what we've done so far, if we manage to get in the playoffs off the back of it, having Neil Harris as manager will be a massive part of that. As if we have a squad consisting of players, probably the ability that we look like we've got at the moment, with an average League Two manager, I think would very much be probably a 14th, 15th in League Two side. But when you've got someone like Harris, who for me could still manage at the bottom end of the Championship, would have half a chance, I'm sure. Just
maybe a few other things from me, mate. I think if I don't want to labour this too much, let's not be too negative on things. But just on Scally, I think towards the end of the season, a lot less adversarial than what he was prior to that, which I think was probably his way of trying to actually curry favour with the fans and try and get them on side against Evans. But I think it actually went the opposite way. The moment Harris was on board, he didn't need to do any of that. And I think that showed with him not putting any videos out. But I think just on season tickets, there's a few things I'll just point out that we're still doing wrong, in my opinion. Season tickets there's no finance option. We're in a cost of living crisis. We're in the Medway Towns, which is a relatively deprived area. And to ask people to fork out 300-400 quid is a nonsense, in my opinion. To not have a finance option, I just do not understand. So that's one point. And then catering is still an issue at the ground. And there's more promises he's put forward this season that he's not acted on. So other than the self-service pumps that we still have, that are still
Take that one off.
8 years in the making, I think now. But we've got the 1893 club was promised as a sort of I think it was for the refunds, wasn't it, or something to do with the season tickets?
Yeah, I think I'm a member apparently.
Right, a non-existent club, and also there was little things, mate. It's little things that wind me up. Just he promised a food app where they deliver food to your seat. Whatever happened with that? There's so many things that he constantly suggests are going to happen.
We need food before we can do a food app, I'd imagine.
Exactly. So all I would say is just if he watches this, and I've said it before, under promise and over deliver. Do not do the opposite, which is what he constantly does, which does not help him in any way. Put aside any adversarial nature to the fans or not spending any money. That is one of his worst traits.
No, you're right, and it's just common sense. That's not a dig at Paul Scally. I'd say that to you if you was running the club, or Reece would say it to me. Yeah, if you promise the earth and then you come up short, you're going to start angering people. If you say we're going to do our best and then we overachieve, people are going to go, we set out and we did just that. We overachieved. So yeah, it's a very good point.
What's happened with the stadium?
We could probably do a whole new episode on the self-service pumps, and Jack could run that on another day, but we're steer clear of it for now. But yeah, I mean, we could be sitting here at the end of this week, and we could have another 3 or 4 signings in, and we could be going, wow, this squad's suddenly starting to take shape, and we might have to eat a bit of humble pie. And I'm pretty sure we'd all agree that we'd love to be sitting here eating a bit of humble pie if we go and get 3 or 4 very good League Two signings through the door in the next couple of days. But I think, like we've all said, we know where we are and we know why we are where we are. Does it mean we stop loving the club? No, but it doesn't mean we have to settle. People can say yes, and I get this, and I've said this as well. We are historically a League One / League Two club, but we've not been in League Two for a decade. So we're certainly more a League One club in recent history than we are League Two. But we'll get on to what we deem a successful season a bit later. You just touched on season tickets, Jack. The finance thing makes me laugh, and I get we should have it, and I'm not saying it's something that we shouldn't have. But at the same time, we all know that the season tickets are going to go on sale generally about the same time each year. Can save up. That's what I do. But that's just me personally.
Yeah. Or you could put it on a credit card, couldn't you? On a 0% credit card. Yeah. I get it, but it's putting barriers up for people. Of course,
no, and I'm saying it in jest because I'd imagine 99% of Football League clubs have all got that option where you can pay monthly or half-season tickets, monthly tickets. There's plenty of ways we could do it. That you could just buy a block of 4 or 5. Obviously, we're not marketing people. We're just sitting here and voicing ideas and using this as a soundboard. But you mentioned season ticket sales. I've got one. Reece.
Yep.
Jack.
Only because it was £300 though. If he'd have done, because I remember when he brought the whole letter out with him, he said that he should be putting them up basically, but because we were so bad and we got relegated, he was doing us all a massive favour.
Sorry, we'll get to that in a minute. Price freeze.
Yeah. Had we been relegated and the prices had gone up, I wouldn't have bothered.
So what did you make of the price freeze? Because yes, we're still paying the same price that we paid for League One football 12 months ago. But if you compare it to, I think, the teams that went up out of League Two last season, and certainly a third of the division this season, we are still very reasonable in terms of what it works out over a 23 game campaign. I think it works out about $13.50 a game, which I don't think's
that's not bad.
bad.
No, that's not bad at all. And you've got to remember, I mean, I begrudge praising Scally if I'm honest, right? But £13 a game in a cost of living crisis is not bad. Let's be honest.
Then he's got to go that step further and make the match day experience better. Because let's be honest, I know you didn't go to many games last season, and Reece and me probably went to too many for what we'd have liked based on what we had to watch. There was no match day experience. We could have had a poor team and got relegated, but if you'd been able to go there and get a burger readily, or the choice of meat food that we used to have when it all opened up under the rain, I mean, at least the social side would be better. But for me, it just felt like you went in, I bought a bottle of water. I'm not a big drinker. I bought a programme. I sat down, did my match day live. I clapped the players off or booed them off, and walked out again. There was no encouragement for me to want to go to the factory or to hang around in the area afterwards. But he's
No.
got to do something to make the match day experience better for me. That's half time. We used to have the gems. You know, it's not for everyone. I'm 40. It's not something that interests me, but other perverts might like it. I don't know. Half time penalty shootout. There was plenty used to be going on. The crossbar challenge that Stocky took part in a couple of years ago to try and win tickets, or a match ball, or just something. It just engaged the supporter base for that 15 minutes, especially more so in a season when we was probably trying to forget what we'd watched for 45 minutes. It was probably more imperative than ever. But any other ideas on what we can do to improve the whole experience of coming to the Priestfield?
I'll tell you
Apart
what,
from
mate.
win more football matches, of course.
I'll tell you what, mate. Tongue in cheek, but maybe serving beers quicker in the factory with self-service pumps might be a good idea.
He's off again.
Coming soon since 2015.
Exactly. Yeah, I'm sure it was announced in the pathway to the Premier League brochure.
The new ground's got to come first yet, Jack.
Yeah, maybe that's where they're coming soon. Yeah, we jest. I don't know, mate. I think just bringing them things back would be good. Having a successful football team ultimately is the main thing. I think with the factory, I mean, I went to a couple of home games last season, not many, and in the Sunderland game, for instance, the person that ran the factory openly was very adversarial. So I think just realizing that they're customers and not minions to the club would be the first thing. There's no match day experience at all. I think just getting that sense of community back with the club, I just don't think that will happen now all the time. Scally's in charge. I think the link has broken for many people, and even the ones that are on the fence realise that. And even Scally realises this, that his time is ultimately up in taking us anywhere. It's just a case of when he goes rather than if. And even people that back him kind of would agree that, you know, they wouldn't be adverse completely to someone new coming in as long as they weren't a complete shyster. Exactly.
Do you see it changing at all, Reece? Say we are sitting here at, I don't know, middle of September, start of October. I don't know how many games we'd have played by then, but say we've won 70% of our games in the league, and you know we've won a couple of games in the League Cup and we've got a nice plum draw. Do you think that the attitude could potentially swing back round the other way? Because essentially Paul Scally is the man that appointed Neil Harris. So if Neil Harris then starts delivering on the pitch and we become a club that's winning football matches rather than losing them again, that reflects better on the chairman. Or do you, like Jack, do you think it's probably too late for the majority of the fan base?
Obviously, in general, football fans are quite fickle, aren't they? And if we get to November and we're sitting in the top three of the league, I don't expect to see people on Twitter saying Scally out like they were when we was second bottom of League Two. That's just the way football works. Mm-hmm. But does that ultimately change Scally and what he is? Probably not. You know, I'm probably not the right place to go right into it. But obviously, Matt, we've been to these evenings that Martin Allen's put on and found out firsthand what he's done in the immediate aftermath of us winning the league title. So I think even if we are successful in a short-term period, I think in the long-term grand scheme of things, in the bigger picture, I genuinely don't think he's going to vastly change from how he's been the last few years.
So essentially what you're saying is if we win the League Two title, us fans have got to have a whip round next summer and buy a lawnmower.
And training kit.
Yeah.
If anyone wants to go to an evening with Martin Allen, we've wasted a story on you there, just to let you know, because we all went to it. But yeah, he's not going to change his personality. He's not going to change the way he is as a businessman. He's kept us afloat all this time. Mm-hmm. Hopefully, we're not in a position where administration is anywhere near us at the moment, although it's probably nearer than it's ever been, I dare say. But all the while he's here, we will stagnate. I think. Ultimately, I think there's probably more. I don't know. I was about to say there's probably more chance of us getting relegated this year than promoted. I think I'm probably stealing a bit later, Matt, but I think we're probably mid-table fodder this season. I think we'll consolidate, which you don't want to be doing in League Two. We all want to be getting promoted, but I don't think it's realistic. With the budget we'll be given, the players we brought in, who I don't think are bad, I just don't think they're promotion worthy. Mm-hmm. And just the feeling around the club and the gates, everything around it, I just don't think it lends itself to a promotion season. I hope I'm wrong.
No, that's fine. And we all see it differently, don't we? And like I said, I'm generally probably the one whose glass is the most full up out of us three. Reece is somewhere in the middle, and Jax is still under the self-service pump in the factory, waiting for the thing to work. But before we finish up, then let's finish up on football talk, because ultimately that's what we all love. We have got 8 transfers in. I've done it in positional order because I can't remember who was first. I think it was Will Wright, but I'm just going to do it by position. We've signed 2 goalkeepers. One, unfortunately, Reece, highly rated. Ashley Maynard Brewer came in from Charlton. Lots of decent feedback on social media from Charlton fans. A lot of them thought he was going to be in and around their squad. Looks like he might be out for a couple of months, unfortunately, after dislocating a shoulder, it looks like. So we'll talk to you about Jake Turner. We've mentioned goalkeepers readily available at this level. Not a lot to go on, but are you fairly happy with taking the injury out, the 2 goalkeeping additions?
Yeah, because I'm very much in agreement with what you've already touched on, that at our level, and even in League One, to be honest, it's not that difficult to find a goalkeeper that's capable of doing the job. When we sat here with 7 players, not having a goalkeeper on the books was quite down low in the list of things that were bothering me, to be honest. I think it's more important that you have the right players in front of them in the back lines and the keeper that actually themselves. So yeah, I'm fairly content with that. Obviously, it's unfortunate that one of them's already picked up an injury. How long exactly that will keep him out for, we don't know. It may force us back into the market for another one. But yeah, I fully expect that as long as they're well protected, either of them will do a half decent job in League Two, to be honest.
I think if you look at the scale I said of have they got a decent record in the Football League, and were the club that they were last at gutted to lose him? Well, obviously Newcastle weren't, but Colchester they were when he had to go back. So that's a good sign in this league. Has he made many appearances at this level or any level in the Football League? No. So it's one of those where he's got potential, he's got a point to prove, and he's highly rated.
Brilliant, yeah, or could be a disaster, yeah. No, I think that sums it up pretty well. Just quickly to you, Jack, then obviously Reece has mentioned the fact that we might have to go back into the market for a keeper, whether that's loan or, because I can't see us taking a chance with the youngster that we've got on a youth contract from Dover, not in a million years. What do you think personally will be the maximum amount of time that Maynard Brewer's out for before we say we've just got to, cut our losses and look elsewhere?
Well, let's see what a scan comes back with. But a dislocated shoulder could be anything from a month to 6, depending.
I think so, and obviously the big concern is he's done it before.
Yeah, he's a goalkeeper.
I'd say now. Then, I mean, he's not our player. We're not contracted to him. Get him, send him back. I mean, my brother, unfortunately, is a Charlton fan, as well as my dad being a Maidstone fan, by the way, which is a horrendous family gathering, by the way. But he said he thought he'd be our number one. He thought he'd be their number one, was what he said. So very highly rated. But if he's injured and he's not our player, just get rid of him. Unfortunately, to be brutal as that, we're not blessed with money, are we? So
no, I totally agree. To be honest, I think if it's anything more than a couple of weeks, which it is going to be, I mean, we could maybe a month. If we're saying a month from here, we're looking at first, second week of August. We could probably get away with it.
Maybe September. Maybe
our
September.
Goalkeeping coach, dare I say, it's only 31. It was good enough for Simon Royce 2 years ago. Moving on to defence, which we know we're still massively lacking in options. Reece, I want to talk to you about the 2 players we've got quickly. You said you're concerned about the left-back area, which is David Tatonda and Bailey Akehurst. One very inexperienced, one generally wasn't great last season, has been relegated twice in 2 seasons. So just expand on what your concerns are in that area.
Well, I think in terms of the playing point of view, if I take Evans, Scally out of the equation, our relegation, more than we didn't score enough goals, I think, was we let too many in. And you only have to look at the contrast when Harris took over. Harris nearly kept us up, not because he got us scoring goals all of a sudden. It's because he found a way to stop us conceding as many. And like you've both touched on, when we've been successful in the past, it's always been based on that strong foundation, working from the back forwards. So for me, it's the most important part of the team for us to get right. And like you say, along with Tatonda, we've got Aimer as well, who, don't get me wrong, in his time at Gills, Aimer's been a good servant for us generally. But again, it's 2 relegations in 2 years. Do you want too many players that sort of add that spiral of negativity surrounding their career for a couple of years. I wouldn't want to be building my backline around that, to be honest. And then Elkan Baggott obviously comes with a lot of promise by the sounds of it, but like Jack's touched on with where we are at the moment, he's not really got any EFL experience. So it's one that, you know what it's like when you sign young players, they can go one way or the other. They can be like Cumming was for us, they can be incredible, or they could be like Trey Coyle or Zach Medley or someone like that.
That was going to be my
and they
two
really
examples.
don't deliver for us.
It could be a Robbie Cundy,
Yeah.
or it could be a Zach Medley / Christian Magoma.
Yeah,
unfortunately.
If you look at the defence, again, Will Wright looks a good sign on paper. He was wanted by Dagenham. The fans were gutted he left, but again, no experience in the league. So it's one of the two sides of the coin that aren't there, and it's exactly the same with the other lad we've signed, as Reece has touched on. Elkan Baggott comes with a lot of promise. Ipswich have given him a new 3-year deal. Clearly, they want him. The fans thought he might be playing centre back for him this year, but he's played a couple of times for Kings Lynn and got relegated from the conference. So there's negatives to all of the signings, but there's positives too, is the key thing. I don't think there's been one signing where you look at it and go, they've either not got experience and the fans are saying, Jesus Christ, what have you done signing him like they did with Tutonda last season? Yeah. So undoubtedly, I think the business this year is better in League Two than it was in League One last year with Evans.
And what I'd say about Wright is that obviously, he's not got EFL experience, but he is one of the ones that are of a better age. He's mid-20s, isn't he, I think? And generally, I'm pretty sure a team that's come up from the conference hasn't been relegated straight back out of League Two for over a decade. So I do think that actually, in terms of quality, the gap between moving up from the conference to League Two isn't actually that high. And obviously, he's playing at quite a high end of the conference. So I'm quite confident that he will actually end up being an upgrade on Jackson, to be honest.
And he was their captain, I think, if I'm not too.
That was going to be my point. I've just looked through the 8 signings that we've made. We've got 3 that have come in that have been captains. Will Wright captained Dagenham for the last 3 months of the season, I think, after their first choice got injured. Sean Williams obviously has been captain for Millwall for plenty of times. I think he might have captained his country a couple of times as well. The other one's slightly different, but it's Dom Jeffries, who captained Brentford B last season about 40 times, and I think he won their B team player of the year. So there's potential again, which is a word that we keep using. I'm going to let you talk about the next one, Jack, and I'm going to come back to, because we've covered the goalkeepers, we've done Will Wright, we've spoken about Baggott. I'm going to take Sean Williams. I know Reece has mentioned that he thinks he'd be a very good player. I watched him Saturday at Dover. I know it's only Dover, and I don't mean that disrespectfully to Andy Hessenthaler or his team, because they beat us as well. But he's obviously going to come up against teams and players that are a lot better than what he was up against. And I understand it's friendlies. Just looks like a player that has a little bit more time on the ball, just a little bit of class, a little bit more know-how, a little bit more awareness of his surroundings. If you said to me now, from what we've got, who will be the key player for Gills this season, I'd say Sean Williams. Literally everything went through him first half. He was always an option. What we interestingly did really well was we allowed the trial right back, which I think was Shay Alexander, who's ex-Wimbledon. Can't say I know anything about him, and I thought my League One knowledge was quite good. We had David Tutonda the other side. They was allowed to bomb on and get high. And one of Sean Williams or Stuart O'Keefe automatically dropped in and made a back 3, which meant we could keep playing and we could leave the fullbacks high and pin them back. Sean Williams, not once did he not make himself available, whether it was 5-10 yard square balls, going back to the keeper, he just kept the ball really well. And that was the biggest thing for me, that there was a real change on how we played. I would say in 45 minutes, and I'm not even saying this half joking, I think our centre-backs took the ball short off of our keeper more times in 3/4 of an hour than we did in the entirety of last season. And for me, that was a big thing that said to me, we're going to play a completely different way. We went direct a couple of times to a young lad. We might do it now that we've got Mika Mandron a bit more, but it was done with a purpose rather than just, we've got centre, we'll roll it back and we'll smack it up in the air and hope that Dane Oliver wins it. So I think the way we're going to play is going to be different. And hopefully we'll see that evolve organically over the next couple of weeks with more people coming in. But I think Sean Williams could be absolutely massive for our season if we can get him to play 35, 40 league games.
I think if he was if we was in League One still, I'd be saying it's not a particularly great signing for his age and the level we're at. I think in League Two could be an excellent signing. Again, you go back to times when we've been promoted. We've generally always had that kind of older warhorse in centre midfield or available to be in midfield. Dave Martin springs to mind.
He did it for one season. Tony Pulis brought him to do it for 12 months and get us out of that division.
Yeah, I think he's a good signing, mate. It's one of those where, I mean, my cousin's a Millwall fan, just to add more to the family repertoire. And he is of the opinion his legs are probably gone, but in League Two, you don't necessarily mind that too much. He'll probably be able to be all right. But in terms of his actual ability and his nous, I think it'll be a very good signing for me.
And again, if we're looking for other sort of comparisons to cling on to, obviously we've mentioned them already. But Bristol Rovers went up last season. They had Glenn Whelan playing centre midfield, who's even older than Williams is. I think it's if you're going to have a player like that in the middle of your team, it's about having legs around them, and then relying on him to do his bit on the ball, right, and make sure we help him out with the work off it. I think that's the most important thing.
I think Tranmere have had Jay Spearing for a couple of seasons up until last year as well, and they was doing it into his mid-30s, and they've been in and around the playoffs for a good 2-3 seasons now. So there is a real case for someone to go into any team that wants to be anywhere near that top third and just be someone that probably won't move more than out of a 10-yard radius, but will know how to play the game and read the game so well.
I would just say midfield-wise, mate, just to interject, I think midfield-wise, maybe barring one more player in the centre or attacking, if we were playing a diamond or that sort of area of the pitch, I think we've actually got a bloody good midfield, actually. That's probably the one positive at the moment. Goalkeepers, I would have said is a positive, but he's now injured, one of the lads. But midfield, I'm not, other than wingers, which we clearly need, I'd say the centre of the pitch in midfield and attacking mid is actually quite decent for this level.
Yeah, because another name that start of the summer, Reece, I think that was being bandied about on social media was Ollie Lee. I had this chat over and over again back end of last season. Oliver Lee is not a holding midfielder. I know Neil Harris come out and said that he played there 18 times under him and we kept 8 clean sheets. But he's now come out and said Ollie Lee's going to play further forward. So I wonder if, number one, Neil knows that the budget's not huge. So he said, right, Ollie Lee, Ben Reeves, you go and compete to be the 10 up the pitch. And then we can get people in and around him. Henry Wise was another one on trial on Saturday who I thought was very good second half. Kept the ball very well in tight spaces. I'm sure he's not afraid of a tackle based on just who his old man is. Could that potentially be one that comes in as the additional one? Low risk in terms of you sign him for a year, potential for another year if he does all right. Probably only going to be on tops £1,000 a week, in and around there. I'm just surmising, thinking out loud. But yeah, I have to agree with Jack. I think midfield's most certainly our strongest area at the moment. We've got the ability to play a 4-3-3, a 4-2-3-1, or a diamond as well.
Yeah. I would agree with Jack. I'd like one more in midfield, mainly because obviously O'Keefe and Williams are in their 30s. Reeves has a history of injury problems. We've got Macca, who, I mean, throughout his career, his injury record's probably been okay, but he's coming back from a long one at his age. You never know exactly how it's going to go. So I would like one more. Wise I've not seen, but obviously he's had some grounding at Watford, hasn't he? So he must technically have some ability there. And yeah, when you just before you mentioned that, I was going to ask you about him was you went to the Dover game. Is Lee playing in his right place now?
Lee played further forward. Obviously, it was Ben Reeves that was slightly out of position because we played a 4-2-3-1 to start with. So we had Williams and O'Keefe sitting in front protecting. And then Ollie was further forward. And then we had the trialist Jordan Green from the right and Ben Reeves from the left. So Ben Reeves was the one that was playing slightly out of position. I'd quite like to have played from the right a little bit because then he could have cut in and tried shooting with his left foot. Whereas because he lacks a bit of pace, Reeves, and I like him, I thought he was probably one of our better players under Harris. Obviously, automatically went down the outside and then had to stop and come back inside square because he lacks that pace. But again, we've said friendlies are for fitness, minutes in the legs. So it was needs must. But I think it'll be him and Lee that compete to play as a number 10 behind a front one or a front two, depending on how we play.
I wonder if we'll re-sign Lloyd as well. That is an option, potentially.
But again, it's another risk, isn't it? Because it's another injury one. I think there was talk after Folkestone. I think Lewis Browning wrote an article and said that he spoke to Alex McDonald and he's going to play wide this season. So I think there's definitely a case for getting, maybe not someone that's going to play every week, but certainly someone that can provide decent backup because we've not spoke about him actually. Dom Jeffries is the other one in there that came in from Brentford B. What do we make of that signing?
I would just say, mate, if we go back to the scale I've gone with, completely unproven. And you could argue the fans weren't going to see him go because it's Brentford B. On the flip side, if you look at his record at Brentford B, which I don't know how comparable you would make that to League One, he scored 8 goals, I think, and set up 7. If he repeats that anywhere remotely like that in centre mid, that's a great return for a centre midfielder.
I think even if he did half of that, we'd be laughing. 8 goals contributions in total, I think, because I don't think he's going to start the season, personally. That's just my personal opinion. I think Harris will ultimately go with experience first if he can, to try and start us as well as we can. And then we can try and integrate the younger players, maybe, if we are playing well. I'd imagine he'll probably start cup games, trophy games to start with. Reece, what's your sort of thoughts on how we use Dom Jeffries to start with, at least?
Yeah, it wouldn't surprise me if that was the case. Obviously, without any of us ever seen him play, it's hard to judge too much. Yes, he comes with high reviews from the B team, but like I touched on earlier with loan players, it's the same kind of thing. When you're signing any player from a B team, you know, if I remember rightly, Tom Dixon-Peters was slamming goals in for Norwich when we signed him, and you just never know how a player of that age is going to adjust to men's football. But when you hear him speak in his iFollow interview about his attributes, he sounds like he's the right kind of character that could adjust to League Two football quite easily. He says he's quite combative. He won't pull out of a tackle, things like that. He'll put himself about, and that's one of the first things you need in League Two. So if he can do that, and if he can handle himself physically, obviously with where he's had some grounding, he will probably have some quality at this level on the ball to improve us. But I agree with you. I'd have thought sort of we're going to be looking at Williams, O'Keefe, Lee or Reeves to start the season.
Dare I say a young Hessenthaler based on the attributes, but that's a pretty big comparison. He's got to live up to it.
Well, did you mean Andy or Jake?
And Andy, to be fair, you know, combative, pops up with a goal, pops up with an assist. If he can repeat that for us, I'd be delighted. But it's men's football, like Reece says.
Of course, yeah, and it's a big difference, which for me is the reason I'd say that I don't think he'll suddenly be chucked in first day of the season unless we have to because of injuries. But I think what we've said, though, is we're starting to see, I know Reece said one signing can change how your whole concept of or approach to what the season might end up like. And I think Mika Mandron done that because he gives us a focal point. He gives us that ability now to play 2 ways. The friendly that I went to watch, generally, if we went direct, it was hard because we had Lewis Walker, who's not the biggest. Don't get me wrong, he won a couple of headers and he worked hard and he ran the channels well enough. But he's not someone where I thought he's going to score you 10 league goals. I'm not saying I wouldn't be averse to him or totally against him coming in again, like Henry Wise, if it was to bulk the squad out, which we're going to have to do, I think. So say we had Mandron, we signed Ola Offie, we could maybe stretch to one more or him, then, and we're only going to play one up top, then I wouldn't be totally against it. But it wasn't someone that screamed, he's going to win us the title or fire us into the playoffs. But again, I'm basing it on 45 minutes.
Personally, I don't remember a single, you can steer me wrong on this, steer me right, excuse me. The only trialist I can remember us signing that actually turned out to be any good was one we'd had previously, which was Spiller. And even then he weren't the same player as we had previously. I honestly can't think of a single trialist that's ever actually gone on to be any good for us, other than Gazaniga. That's the only one I can think of. And even then, I think Nelson was a better replacement than Gazaniga was or would have been at that season. So I always think it's a dodgy ground going for trialists. That said, Green and Wise do look decent on paper, but I think they're probably trialists. We probably have trialists in our squad in pre-season without playing friendlies that we don't even know about over the years that end up signing anyway, like Josh Wright, I think, was under Edinburgh.
Yeah, potentially,
I think it's always dangerous territory, especially if you want to be considering promotion, to be signing lots of trialists. I'd urge against it, but
I'd say a couple, to be honest.
Yeah.
You wouldn't want to be going sort of a whole bench full of them. I totally agree. The only other one I think that we might have another look at, and I think there's a behind closed doors game tomorrow, isn't there? I think it's a championship side of Luton, I think I've read on social media, at their training ground. The only other one, and again, it comes back to, because we're desperately short in that area, was Jacob Mensah, Ramsgate as a kid, so obviously local, knows the area, went to Crystal Palace, went on to Morecambe. I thought he done all right. He started a bit tentatively, but again, he's playing with a kid that was making his debut signed the day before, so there was going to be no understanding or relationship in terms of the two centre backs as a pairing. But I thought he improved. So I'd like us to have another look at him tomorrow. That'd be my three. If we was going to have to say, if someone said to me, gun to the head, you've got to sign three of the try list, it'd be Mensah, Green, and Wise for me. The lad who came on second half was an absolute catastrophe, bless him, that Reece Greenwich. First tackle, he nearly broke Lee Martin in half, and that's from the goal they scored from there. And I said, I think during the match day live or afterwards, he'd have been sent off in a competitive game because he'd have got booked for that challenge at best. And then he effectively hip tossed someone over the hoardings at the end of the second half. So, and he looked like Hightower at Police Academy, bless him. He was absolutely huge, but he looked like Bambi with anger issues to me, unfortunately. I think we've summed up the squad. We are where we are. I think, like Reece said, it is starting to take shape now. You can see a couple of systems that we could potentially play. All right, we've not got backup in a lot of them areas, but we could play probably a 4-3-3, a 4-2, a 4-4-2 diamond. So at least there are some sort of semblance of shapes appearing. We do need to add to it, and quite quickly, I think. Before we finish up, 22-23 is 2.5 weeks away now. We go to Wimbledon on the first day of the season, Reece. Without having to say a finishing position, I know Jack has already said his, and we'll let him expand on that in a second. How do you see our first season in a decade back in the basement division going?
I probably would sit along the lines with Jack that I think if we finish above mid-table, I think we've probably overachieved a little bit. And that's not just being negative for the sake of it, it's being realistic. That could change. You know, if we sign 2 or 3 sort of game change, like marquee signings that we don't really expect, the landscape changes. But like I've already touched on, we also have to be respectful of the financial clout of our opponents in League Two is much different to what it was 10 years ago when we was last in the division. You know, there are teams that can probably sign players on 4 or 5 grand a week at League Two. You know, it says it all that Stockport have come straight out of the conference and they're the favourite to win League Two. That's what we're up against. And, you know, there's probably the top 6 in the conference probably spend more money than we do, such is the way the game's going now. So we have to be respectful of that. I just think the key for us, regardless of what the squad looks like, if at Christmas time we can be in the top 12, because generally the way League Two always seems to work is that it's always really competitive up the top. And even if you're 12th at Christmas, you're never that far off from the top 7. If we can be in that position, Harris, if he's got the recruitment generally right, and then we can add a couple more in January, I think we'll be a lot stronger in the second half of the season. And then maybe we can look at the potential of going on a run and really gate crushing that top 7. But at the moment, I think mid-table is probably about where we'll be.
I think if I was to go for a very politician's answer, I'm going to sit on the fence and probably predict 12th. It's just slap bang in the middle, and just say that, you know, I think that would be a good season, but I could see us either making the playoffs or being relegated. I could see any one of the 3 scenarios, to be honest. It's a very unknown quantity, but if you're telling me right now, we're looking at the squad now, coupled with the fact that we haven't got a full squad, there's going to be a lack of cohesion. We might not start the season well because of it. I think 12 would be a good season at the moment. Ideally, we'd obviously finish a lot higher, but I could honestly see us be dragged into a relegation battle too. It really is horses for courses, mate. Could go anyway.
Yeah, and like we've said, we've spoken about the players. There's a lot of question marks over all of them. There's a lot of potential as well. So, like Jack said, if that potential doesn't get fulfilled, then we could be in trouble. I don't think so. I think we've got a too good a management team to be able to stay well clear of the bottom 2. And he said bottom 4. It's only bottom 2, isn't it? Which helps us out straight away. And I think there's a lot of clubs. As much as there's a lot of clubs, I think, that will spend a lot more than us. I still think there's quite a few clubs that won't have the budget and the backing that we do have. If you look at like the Hartlepools, the Barrows, that type of team, I don't think they're going to be able to compete with us, which says a lot. So you might have, like we've already said about League One, but on a smaller scale, it could almost be divided into like 3 mini leagues. You could have the top 8 or 9 that are going to try and spend their way out of the league, the middle teams, which I'd probably put us in at the moment, and then the ones that are probably going to say, if we finish 22nd, they've had a decent season. I'm not going to say a position because I will do a season preview video in a week or so. But yeah, at the moment, based on the squad as it is, and that's all we can take it on because we haven't got crystal balls. I would say probably around mid-table is where I'd put us if I had to put us in a position at the moment and pin the tail on the proverbial donkey.
I think we were too optimistic last season, mate. Was the unfortunate end scenario.
I said 10th, didn't I, for the third season in a row, and I looked like a right idiot. And I also had Plymouth to get relegated.
Well, we said there was no danger of us ever going down under Evans, which
yeah, we did.
Which unfortunately was incorrect. So it just shows to show you don't ever know, do you? But
exactly.
Yeah. I think mid-table would be decent. Let's hope for the playoffs or more. But you know, it's a weird old league. We could fall shorter than 12th.
Certainly is, and yeah, and we're all sort of learning on the job again. I mean, from my point of view, through doing the channel, I've had to do a lot of research this summer and keep a lot of a closer eye because you naturally build up information and knowledge of a division, and we'd been in it for 10 years, so it was quite easy to know who the stronger teams were, who the better managers were. But for me, it's been quite fun in that sense. That's probably been the only silver lining of relegation, is there's a lot more teams to sort of get stuck into. But it's been great fun again, fellas. I really do enjoy these chats. They're great fun, like I say, in getting different views, because people have commented and said that it's better when you've got multi people on the chat because you get different ideas and different perspectives. So appreciate you taking the time out your evening again, gents. Either of you got anything to add before we disappear?
I think only just to go back to what you just said there, mate. The thing I've had to adjust to is clicking on bloody League 2 on BBC Sport instead of League 1. I keep doing it accidentally, which is a gut wrencher when you do it. But yeah, we're all having to adjust.
Yeah, I'm the same with that Fan Hub app, because it's updating for the summer at the moment. All the news feed automatically goes to League 1, and I'm like, no, we're not there. Thanks very much. Please update it. So, Reece, anything to sum up?
No, I don't think so.
No, right. Gills fans and fans of any other club that's been watching, we appreciate it. Please keep doing the usual. Comment down below. Let us know your thoughts on anything that's been discussed between myself, Jack, and Reece. You know where we are: Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. Be back Saturday, myself and Boz, for a match day live at home to Portsmouth, which again will be a good test to see where we're really at. Certainly more of a challenge than Folkestone and Dover so far. It'll give us a better idea of where we are in terms of the squad. Fingers crossed, me and Boz will have a couple more signings to talk about pre-game. But enjoy the rest of your week. Thanks for watching. And until next time, up the Gills.